And baseball, the sport we all love to battle through. We're chipping away at that as well. So plenty of action going on, and I look forward to a great summer, hopefully.
All right, guys. I believe we are muted in the YouTube channel. There we go. Okay, there we go. And where
Damn
we
it.
can
Happy to hear he's not counting each day.
though they manufactured that in his last game where they really focused on getting him the ball. It'll be interesting to see how Algier and Bijan kind of work together. I would like to think that Cordarrelle Patterson's going back to wide receiver full time for them. It's certainly, this is one of those ones I wouldn't bet until training camp, because I want to see how they're divvying up the carries. I want to see how they're kind of looking at things. But this is a great system for Bijan to be in. I kind of look at the other books. We use the DraftKings numbers. BetMGM only 1 yard less, 1,099.5 yards. So the books are pretty firm on this number. I would kind of wait on this one. This is one of those hold situations. I'm not buying, I'm not selling. I want to see training camp wise how they kind of divvy up the carries for these two guys.
We're talking Bijan Robinson, 1,100.5 yards. Andrew, what do you do with the Falcons running back?
Yeah, highest drafted running back since Saquon Barkley. Matt talked about the hype for him. You're going to hear this all the time, but obviously these type of props and what we do, I don't think fantasy always correlates, right? I think that, fantasy points, fantasy touchdowns and things like that don't necessarily correlate with yards. But everything I'm seeing is that there's not going to be much of a work-in process. The second that he starts wearing a Falcons jersey, it's going to be a workhorse game after workhorse game after workhorse game, and he's going to get all the touches he really needs. Now, the question is health and game scripts and things like that. So, guys, when I looked and I do my research on Robinson here, the more I look at the schedule, the more I say to myself, I guess I'm kind of deflecting from the original question, but the more I want to just look at games to go over his yards individually. That's kind of the way I feel like we can make some really good money off this guy this year, whether it's touchdown scores, whether it's just taking his over rushing yards or attempts. But for a full season, for this full number for the entire year, I'm not sure I can get to the window with it. But I think we can make some profit with this guy. I think he will get a ton of touches. And I think the Falcons are going to be improved this year, and he's exactly what they needed. But for me, it makes more sense, especially in a situation like this with a young guy like he is, to not immediately give, and bet ourselves, of course, a season-long bet. So, Andy, I don't know about you, but I look forward to cashing tickets some weeks with him, but I don't know about a season-long wager.
It's a great way to attack it. I mean, you don't have to just focus on the season number. I will tell you, I'm going over in a big way in this one. The injury is the biggest concern for me. It's a Falcons team that rushed for over 2,700 yards last year. and they have Bijan listed at the top of the depth chart. I'm a fan of Tyler Algier. I think he's a great running back. So I love the two-headed monster that they have there. I'm not sure their quarterback runs a whole lot. And we look at their wide receiving core. Drake London's obviously their number one wide receiver now, but boy, it falls off a cliff. Mac Hollins and Scotty Miller are your 2 and 3. They have Kyle Pitts, who is, I guess he was a disappointment from fantasy football owner's perspective, but he's still a big body and a big target. But I think Bijan's going to run the ball a lot more than maybe even I expect. And I expect a good load from him just because I'm not sure what the options are in this offense. We know that they want to run the ball, and I love their schedule. I mean, they start with Carolina, Green Bay, Detroit. They play Houston. They play Washington. They play, obviously, Tampa a couple times in their division, but then they have Arizona on their schedule. They have Indianapolis. They have Chicago. I think their schedule works out pretty nice. I don't see a lot of games on this schedule that you can project into blowouts for a Falcons team that isn't that good. I think most of their games should be fairly close. And 1,100 is a huge number, but Andrew, I like that. I like you projecting that it's probably going to be a guy that we can take some overs, especially to start the year. As much as I like Tyler Algier, I don't think he overtakes Bijan Robinson. I think they're a really nice 1-2 punch that can extend drives and get more carries for both of them. Of the guys that we're going to talk about, it's the biggest number, and yet I think it's my favorite over. So Bijan Robinson over. So Matt's taking a little bit of a cautious approach. Andrew likes the game to game, and I'll go with the over on this one. So Matt, coming to you on David Montgomery. Low number on this guy, 750.5 yards. New scenery, new backfield. So we have a lot of unknowns with David Montgomery. What are you going with for 750.5 yards?
So if you look at what the Lions have done in the past when it comes to running backs, I mean, look, they had DeAndre Swift, it felt like, for 4,000 years, and they barely used him. And part of it was because of the injury, and part of it was because they just clearly didn't envision him as a 3-down back, which you don't go out and get a guy like David Montgomery and basically make him, a barely used guy. So I think Detroit's going to run the ball plenty here. You look at that running back room. You look at the running back room, though. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be fascinating. A lot of the talk coming out of the OTAs and the mini camps was he lined up in the slot. He was a great wide receiver type guy. He's a guy that we're going to throw to a lot out of the backfield, which makes me think that they're actually going to rely on David Montgomery more as a running back here. I think we're getting a really low number, and I think I actually kind of do like the over. As you look here on BetMGM, his number is 749.5. So once again, we're only a yard difference. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because the passing yards, we saw huge differences for some of these guys. So the book's staying firm for this one. I think this is a one that I would lean towards the over here because Jahmyr Gibbs is getting a lot of work as a wide receiver, lining up as a slot, catching passes out of the backfield. I think he takes over as the DeAndre Swift. I think Montgomery takes over as the Jamal Williams, and I think Montgomery can go over this number. Now, it was a bit of a worry that he struggled a lot with the Bears. Now, the Bears' offensive line was bad. The Lions' offensive line is widely considered a top 5 offensive line. So I like the over here. I think Montgomery's going to get some work. I'm probably going to like his over on his touchdowns, too. He's going to be that 1-yard line guy. Remember, Jamal Williams got a lot of touchdowns in close, too. So I'm bullish on Montgomery this year with the Detroit Lions.
I'm with you on the touchdown number. This is a Detroit team that got Jamal Williams 17 touchdowns last season. So they definitely went away from one guy and focused on another guy to get all the touchdowns. Andrew, where do you stand on David Montgomery, 750.5?
Yeah, I swear to you, Matt wasn't over having coffee with me this morning, but he did take all my notes because that's pretty much what I was going to say. About Montgomery. I think you bring in a guy for a reason. We saw what they did last year. They did run the ball quite a bit, but the only worry, of course, when we take some of these props is, of course, the distribution of the ball, right? How many carries, how many opportunities per game will somebody get? And I think, Brian Leonard yesterday on WagerTalk today talked about worry about what's going to happen, not what did happen. I think if you're handicapping this number, on the Montgomery you saw last year in some of his weakest moments, you might not like this number very much. You might not want to be rushing to bet the over, but looking at this team that he's playing for, looking at the opportunities, looking what they did before, and I think it's a really good point about his quote-unquote competition might be a short yardage pass catcher. So this is a really low number, Andy, and I like the over here.
Yeah, he had 800 yards with the Bears, and the Bears rushed for the most yards of any team last year. Obviously, their quarterback had a lot to do with that one. If I'm going to try and play the other side here, he only averaged 4 yards a carry. This is a David Montgomery. I wouldn't say healthy would be an adjective that would be first come to mind with David Montgomery. Maybe he gets hurt again. Maybe he just doesn't have a burst left, but behind him, cupboard is a little bit bare on the Detroit Lions. Craig Reynolds is a guy that's kind of interesting to me. If you're in a deep fantasy football league, I would if you draft Gibbs or David Montgomery, I would take a long, hard look in the later rounds at Craig Reynolds. He had a couple of flashes last year, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the running back situation in Detroit. I thought Matt did a great job breaking down how Gibbs really may be most effective in the passing game, which I think leaves a lot of carries open. So I think the Detroit Lions backfield is going to be a cautious kind of wait and see. I much prefer David Montgomery over the touchdowns when that number comes out. 750.5 is about where I would project him at. I can make the case for an over and under. So as boring as this one is, I'll take a pass. I will play him maybe over his touchdowns. But Andrew, you brought up playing Bijan Robinson on a game-to-game basis. I'm wondering about David Montgomery will have a touchdown props at the very beginning of the year. If he happens to inherit that Jamal Williams role, you could get some really great plus money to start the year on Montgomery if he gets those goal line carries.
I could see that number getting a lot worse as the year goes on too, Andy. Making some good money with some good prices, and then all of a sudden it gets jacked up later on in the season. That's a good idea.
Yeah. We're going to go to a player near and dear to Matt's heart, Miles Sanders. Matt just can't quit Miles Sanders. We have to talk about him a little bit more. 925.5 yards over under. He makes the move away from Philadelphia. So, Matt, Miles Sanders better than just about anybody. What do you expect? 925.5 yards on a new team, rookie quarterback. How do you project him out?
Just an aside, I thought it was funny that he came out after he left, and he's like, "I wish I got the ball more in the Super Bowl." And if you remember, the very first play, he danced outside and fumbled the ball out of bounds. He also had a pass that probably should have been a fumble, but he dropped it outright. And Kenny Gainwell was just better. So shut up. And he wanted more money than he was worth. But here's the thing. I think he landed in a decent situation. So, when you look at these rushing numbers, there's a bunch of things you want to consider. First, the head coach. I think Frank Reich, and Andy could speak to this because he's the Indy guy. I think Frank Reich is a good coach for him to land with because I think, Reich wants to run the ball occasionally. So I think, and they have the familiarity from in Philadelphia when they were both there. You look at the quarterback. You've got a rookie quarterback in Bryce Young, so you're going to want to run the ball a little bit more. And then you want to look at the offensive line, and he goes from one of the best offensive lines to, a mediocre offensive line in Carolina and a team that you're going to want to stack the box against. He's a guy who's had some injury issues in the past. I'm very worried about taking an over for Miles Sanders. The situation's right in terms of a rookie quarterback, head coach, but I don't like their offensive line. I don't like their offense. And if you're a defense, how are you going to play against Carolina, at least early on in the season? You're going to put 8 in the box. So how is he going to do against stacked boxes early on in the season? So this might be a week-to-week sort of situation, maybe some unders early on and some overs later in the season, but I can't take this guy's season totals with so many question marks surrounding him.
Andrew, what do you think? Miles Sanders on the Carolina Panthers, 925.5 over under. How are you looking?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the under here, 925.5. I think that Miles Sanders is going to be the kind of a sneaky fantasy player, but as far as this number, like Matt said, a lot would have to go right to look and lock in the over here in this one. I expect Miles Sanders to actually be quite a bit of a short yardage pass catcher. I feel like he'll actually catch the ball a lot more than he did in Philly. And the biggest thing for me is the O-line. He went from the best offensive line in the league, one of the best run blocking teams in the league, to a very below average, to keep it respectful. To where he is right now. And that has a lot to do with success. In every sport, you can find hidden statistics where teams or players just look very, very good because of their surroundings and who's around them. Everybody in hockey always talks about certain players that might not be as good if they weren't on the same line as this other player. Well, let's see how good he does on the ground when he does not have that same offensive line. I feel like that could be a big worry. But look, this is the only thing that kind of is counterintuitive for me, is that they still ran the ball the 10th most in the league last year. And now you're adding Sanders, and the workload should be there. But Andy, I feel like it's a lot harder for me when I'm doing these props. I like to keep it simple, write a bunch of stuff down, do my research, and create a case. And if it's harder for me to create a case for one than the other, then I take that one. And for me, under is the play here. Sanders would have to have a great year, I think, and really have no problems to go over this number. And unfortunately, I think it's a whole different story. And kind of like what Matt said, and as much as it kind of probably looks like Matt's like bad mouthing him, I feel like that's actually part of the analysis. Sometimes people think they're better than they are, and when you've got a guy like Kenneth Gainwell taking your spot, no wonder you want to leave. But I don't think he'll be able to be the guy that he thinks he is in his new home.
Oh man, I'm looking at this Carolina Panthers depth chart, and it is shaky. You got Miles Sanders as your number one, and Chuba Hubbard as your number two, and then Raheem Blackshear and Spencer Brown. So it's not a great running back core, which I guess is good for Miles Sanders because, they're going to need Chuba Hubbard as the change of pace. I would expect they use him a little bit more in the passing game than Miles Sanders, just because Chuba Hubbard's not a, great in between the tackles. But then look at this wide receiving core: Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, and Terrence Marshall. That's what they're rolling with Bryce Young. Yikes. Adam Thielen? I mean, Adam Thielen was a shot wide receiver last year. You couldn't get any type of separation, and now a rookie quarterback's going to be throwing him. I think this offense is going to struggle out of the gate, and I think it's going to make for a pretty tough time. That being said, I lean ever so slightly to the over in this one just because of the sheer opportunity that he's going to get. I was stunned to look and see that in the regular season last year with the Eagles, even though they were splitting carries and it felt like they had a million running backs, he had 1,269 yards rushing. I know the offensive line was great, but he had 259 carries. If he gets anywhere near that number, I think he can get over. Again, the Panthers have some really good matchups on their schedule. They get Houston, they get Indianapolis, they get Chicago, they get Green Bay. I know they have Tampa twice, but they get Atlanta a couple times. Seattle's not great against the run. We'll see. And then Minnesota. So I think on their schedule, they've got some pretty decent ones. And just looking at this, I think he has zero competition to lose carries. Of the three guys that we talked about, I think you can make the case Miles Sanders has the surest path to getting the most carries out of these three guys. So 925. And if you think about it, if he has two, 120-yard games at some point, that's 240 yards. You're well on your way to this one as a starting running back. I think it's possible. So obviously health is going to be a concern. I would expect them to limit his carries a little bit. This is not a guy you want to give 25 carries, every day. This isn't a Derrick Henry type of workload you want to give him. But 925.5, I got to lean the over a little bit. So two overs for me. Yes, Matt.
So Andy, I just going back to Montgomery for 1 second, and just want to confirm this with the panel. William Hill, Caesars, has 6.5 touchdowns rushing for Montgomery. Do we all agree that's an easy yes?
Oh,
yeah.
Over. Absolutely. Yeah. Because Matt, the college players coming out a lot more. Gibbs isn't known as a goal line back, especially in the NFL, right?
No, and as we said, if he's working out at slot a lot more, clearly they don't envision him as a guy who's going to get 3rd and 1s. And it's not like Jared Goff is Jalen Hurts or anybody who's going to be doing a lot of quarterback sneaks. I'm surprised that 6.5 was the number there. That's really low considering what Jamal Williams did. And he's essentially replacing Jamal Williams. I don't understand the number, but I'd be glad to take the over there.
It almost seems like they're taking a shot at Montgomery. It's like disrespectful. I don't know. I'm definitely going to take the over on that one. But I want to ask you guys this, because as the game is moving forward, everyone's talking about how, just generally speaking, the good teams have quarterbacks that can run the ball, at least be a little mobile. How much are you guys taking that into account if you're making these season-long rushing yard props? I heard a little bit of you guys mentioning it a little bit, but nowadays, I feel like that's something that has to be considered. You know, if you look even game by game with props, you could have an all-star running back on a team, but if that quarterback loves to run as well, he really takes away opportunities from the running back. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Bijan Robinson, I don't think the Falcons quarterback, I don't think Desmond Ritter is going to run a ton. David Montgomery, obviously, the quarterback's not going to run in Detroit. And I don't know what to expect from Carolina. I think it's going to, we're all going to learn with how much, Bryce Young's going to be a runner in the NFL. I think it would be tough to kind of predict some of these. I think the obvious one is in Detroit. You're not going to get very many rushing touchdowns from Jared Goff, and I really don't expect a whole lot of running from Atlanta. Matt, what do you think about the rushing quarterbacks in this trio?
So, yeah, I mean, Desmond Ritter wasn't really much of a runner, although, obviously we saw Mariota do a lot of it, but they're two different quarterbacks. As you mentioned, Jared Goff is a statue. I quite frequently liked playing his rushing yards under last year. And then I'm looking at Bryce Young. Bryce Young, for the most part in his college career, ran the ball 139 times for 162 yards. He had in his sophomore year, he had 81 rushes for 0 yards, which basically means he probably had a lot of kneel downs, and pretty much they didn't do. And remember, the rushing yards in college are different because some sacks count as rushing yards and rushing attempts as well. But he's not the most mobile guy. Now, you could speak to Frank Reich a little bit more, Andy, but I mean, I don't think he wants that. We just saw Carson Wentz do it. We just saw Matt Ryan. So, like, statues are okay in Frank Reich's offense, it feels like.
Yeah, and I think Frank Reich's a really good coach to start off Bryce Young's career. I mean, Reich is a very likable guy. He's well liked in the locker room. I think one of the problems that Frank Reich had was trying to galvanize, the younger players and the older players. And I think he's going to be a really nice fit to get the career started. I'm not sure what happens after year 3 or 4, but he's a really loving, compassionate, like accepting guy. So when Bryce Young makes, the mistakes that rookies make, Frank Reich's going to be a really nice, supportive coach to have. So I don't really know how that's going to affect Miles Sanders, but at least having a veteran there, to kind of help him out and be, almost like a second coach on the field. I'm sure that's what Sanders is going to be like in that role. So special shout out to all you guys in the chat. Gotta love Childhood Greats. Childhood Great says, I love the under on Miles. Let's be real. He sucks. Pull no punches, Childhood Great. That's just fantastic handicapping right there. Sometimes that's all we need. But yeah, thank you to everybody. Let's be real. So thanks to everybody in the chat today. Russell, Razor, Childhood Great, you guys are awesome. William, Val, if I missed anybody, sorry. So if you guys want us to cover any NFL players, leave them in the comments. Don't leave in the chat. Just leave it in the comments as soon as the show is over, and we'll break down whoever you guys want to. I imagine we'll probably do a few more running backs before we make it to the wide receivers. So before we get to our best bet for the day, let's work on let's do a couple of other topics. Matt, baseball, any update on K-props, things you're monitoring in baseball? How's the last week been for you?
Yeah, so we're going to touch on a couple of teams in certain situations here. And first off, the new Cleveland Guardians from last year are the Washington Nationals. They have gone under in 6 straight K-props, 12 of their last 13. Overall, 44 unders to 22 overs. They're averaging less than 4 strikeouts per game. Yesterday was an easy under on Christian Javier. They've set some numbers pretty high against the Nationals. Today, it'll be interesting to see. Sandy Alcantara is not striking out as many guys as he used to. His numbers 4.5 against Washington today. The Pittsburgh Pirates have gone under in 19 of their last 24 K-props. They have 41 unders to 23 overs. 4.19 strikeouts overall this season. So the Pirates have been very kind. Barely went under yesterday. That was my other victory, was Marcus Stroman under 5.5. He had 5 yesterday. So the Pirates are doing some good work. As two interesting teams to look at for their situations, the Houston Astros averaging over 5 strikeouts per game against right-handed starting pitching, under 4 strikeouts per game against left-handed starting pitching. Yesterday, Mackenzie Gore, who's had a lot of success striking out guys, did not do so against the Astros. So they continue to hold the form. And then Minnesota just stinks against everybody. 5.48 strikeouts against righties, 6.53 strikeouts against lefties. Irony is they've actually gone under more than over in their strikeout props against lefties, even though they're averaging over 6.5 strikeouts per game. So that's rather interesting. But those are just a couple of teams that have some trends going on right now in Major League Baseball.
Great stuff at MLB from Matt Josephs at sportsmemo.com. I'm going to talk a little bit about some mixed martial arts. We have 3 events. We have PFL, we have Bellator, and UFC. A couple of props that I think are worth monitoring. I will start in PFL, which is tonight. I'll start with Larissa Pacheco versus Amber LeBrock. Pacheco's a minus 1,200 favorite, but I kind of like this over 1.5 rounds at plus 160. Pacheco did not finish her last fight. Her last fight was actually a lot closer than we thought. And I think what's happening in this tournament style that PFL does is we're seeing some fighters need to get the finish for extra points, and some just want to win in advance. Pacheco looked like in her last fight, she just wanted to win in advance. She did not go for any big shots, any big submissions. And so even though she's minus 1,200 to win, I think this fight kind of gets extended and she does whatever she can to kind of not get hurt, not put a lot of wear and tear on her body. She should be able to control LeBrock by takedowns and wrestling, striking. LeBrock's got some pretty good head kicks, but I expect Pacheco to roll and get over 1.5. I do have to mention the Biagio-Ali Walsh fight. If you don't know who Biagio-Ali Walsh is, this is Muhammad Ali's grandson, but he's really good at mixed martial arts. Like, he's not getting fights because of the name. He's legit. He's a minus 700 favorite. But to let you know what a finisher this guy is, the under 1.5 rounds, Andrew, is minus 225. I mean, they're just telling you that this is going to be a spark fest on the feet. He's fighting a guy, Travell Miller, who's fought some amateurs on Facebook Live. That's about it. PFL's using this as a showcase for Ali Walsh. I'm serious about that. Andrew, don't laugh. This is real analysis. So the Ali Walsh is going to be on display for the PFL for a few more fights. This is kind of a sacrificial lamb. So take the under on that one. Bellator, couple of really nice spots to look at. I do have to bring up the absolutely hilarious fight of let's see, where is he? He's a minus 1,900. Jordan Newman is a minus 1,900. He's fighting a guy named Matthew Perry. Andrew, this guy has 1 fight since 2012. So yes, give me Jordan Newman under 1.5 rounds. And
how is he out there fighting right now?
Bellator finds these guys that you haven't heard of forever. But yeah, he has 1 fight since 2012. So give me the under 1.5 rounds on Jordan Newman.
Isn't that the guy from
Jordan
Friends?
Newman is yes, Chandler Bing.
Newman.
Yeah, Matthew Perry.
Oh,
well, Newman is the guy from Seinfeld. Matthew Perry is the actor from Friends, Chandler Bing. And I'm pretty sure Chandler Bing has been in more fights since 2012 than Matthew Perry,
guy.
the fighter, has. Yeah. So that could be a pretty fun one. And then my last one, it's a little bit of a long shot, but I really do like it. I'm all over this Gabriela Fernandez over Teresa Bleda. This is a grappler versus striker. Teresa Bleda is the favorite. I'm not sure she's strong enough to get Fernandez down on the ground. Fernandez is fantastic on the feet. She's a great striker. She has one job in this fight, and that is to keep the fight on the feet for the first round. Why? Teresa Bleda fades and loses her cardio in the second and third round. So Fernandez could just keep it on the feet. She's going to piece up Teresa Bleda early and often. I think she wears her down and gets the knockout. Teresa Bleda got knocked out in her first fight in the UFC. She's young, 21 years old. I think they moved her up just a little bit too early. So you can get a big plus money number on Gabriela Fernandez. So those are my MMA props and thoughts that we have for this weekend. So, Andrew,
Andy, I just gotta say,
yeah.
I love how each week you find a different way to describe these fighters we've never heard of, and I just don't understand how the lines aren't bigger the other way. You're like, yeah, so this guy just learned how to fight yesterday, and they found him on the corner of a street, and he's fighting the #1 contender this weekend. Like, how are these not minus 5,000s? Like, I don't understand. You're like, yeah, this guy's been homeless for 10 years, and we found him yesterday. I don't get it.
Well, Andrew, if you would like an explanation, just log on to WagerTalk.com. I happen to have my MMA pack with all of these fighters parlayed together with write-ups about all of them.
Okay.
So it is true. We have an MMA pack with plays in Bellator, PFL, and UFC. That's how many of these guys. Yes, some of these guys I'm not sure how they get fights, and other times the underdogs can surprise. So don't write off all of them, but there's a couple of them you can write off. There's a couple of them this week that you can write off. So Andrew, CFL got off to a good start. Speaking of bad, I mean, I think there's two that we would say pretty bad teams in CFL. Am I wrong on that number? Or are there more than two?
One team has lost 18 straight home games, and the other team, I think, just lost their 14th straight home game.
Those are the two teams I was thinking of.
And the funny thing is, both those teams have actually two of the best fan bases. So reward these fans. Show these guys some love. Like, there's no way those guys should have the worst fan bases. Are the best fan bases. They deserve to boycott until they get a win. But Andy, super excited, as you guys know, about the CFL season. Yesterday was an exciting game for me. Hoping to cash this 5% ticket. Also involved in a first half play tonight. Got a play going on Sunday as well. But, more and more these days, people can get down these props, so I want to give them out. And as we talked about today, about some certain players game by game, the numbers will get worse as far as these props. I feel like we'll start to see that, whether it's for receiving yards, touchdowns, or whatever it may be. But especially for a dominant team like Winnipeg, Drew Wolotarski, his number is 28.5. He had 3 receptions last week against Hamilton for 57 yards. And his longest reception was for 30 yards. And his number for tonight's game is listed at 28.5. And I think that this is an opportunity where people saw that Saskatchewan shut down Edmonton last week. But I think that Andy, Matt, and myself could shut down Edmonton. So it's not really much of an accomplishment for anybody to shut down Edmonton. So Drew Wolotarski, his number's at 28.5 for his receiving yards. I'm all over it. He's probably the second or third option as far as the receiving position is concerned. But in the CFL, that's what I like, betting these guys that are around in the 20s or 30s, staying away from the 70s, 80s, 100-yard guys, because you need a lot to go right to cash those big tickets. But I'll take Drew Wolotarski over 28.5 receiving yards. The guy had a great week last week. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. He can size up against anybody. And I believe he's in for a great night. So if you cannot bet receiving yards, most books that offer CFL will at least give you the touchdown scoring props. And I will be sprinkling on that one as well.
Nice. Great stuff on the CFL. We're going to get to our best bet here in a bit. It's going to be for actually a golf play that doesn't start for another 6 hours or so. Matt, real quick, tell everyone what you have for this weekend and where we can find you at.
Sportsmemo.com, baseball picks for the next couple of weeks. As much as Andrew says we love it, it's a pain in the butt sometimes. So we're going to try and fight through it, and we'll keep putting baseball stuff out. And then, of course, college football win totals. We'll start putting some of that stuff up as we find them and go along.
Great stuff, Matt Josephs at sportsmemo.com. Andrew, tell us where we can find you at. Hopefully we can hear you this time. Where we can find you at, what you have up for this weekend.
Yeah, Matt, I really love it. I love losing in the 9th inning, and then I love switching to first 5 and the other team scoring 4 in the top of the 5th. I love it. I love this sport. It's lots of fun every single day to dive into it. Team totals are going to be an approach for me dominantly moving forward because I don't have to worry about what the other team does whatsoever. I was doing some team totals, but that's going to be a lot of what I'm planning to do in the future with the MLB. Like I mentioned, the CFL plays. We got a first half play for tonight, a best bet going tomorrow. Looking forward to that. And as far as kind of just overall a promo deal. We got CFL 100 takes $100 off my full CFL season, and AM3 gives you 3 days all access every single sport for the price of one. And I haven't been having any huge big bets lately in the UFC. We're still sprinkling along with the 2% and 3%, and those are going pretty well.
Great stuff, Andrew McGinnis at WagerTalk.com. I'm Andy Lang from WagerTalk.com. Every Friday, we run the same promo. It's a promo code Andy3, ANDY3. Get you a 3-day pass for $39. As much as everything is slowing down for a lot of other people, I am just as busy. We've got golf and U.S. Open. We've got UFC, PFL, Bellator. I've got a Formula One race with play already up. And last weekend, we brought in over 6 units on the weekend. The weekend before was insane. We brought in 37 units. It was just felt like we can't lose. And we'll also have lacrosse plays from PLL coming out. So the weekends have been very, very good. It's when we have our most plays, and they have been profitable for quite some time. So really excited to do this promo every Friday. Use a promo code ANDY3, ANDY3, and that gets you 3 days for $39. For the best bet that we are going to use today, I'm going to use a golf head-to-head matchup, and this is for round 2. They're playing out in California, so with the time change, this does not tee off until just after 4 o'clock Eastern time, so you have plenty of time to get this in. And I'm going to take Bryson DeChambeau over Justin Thomas at minus 125 for the best bet in round 2. Bryson DeChambeau is kind of legendary for putting on a ton of muscle. He won a major, and then he went over to Live Tour. He did a ton of damage to his body with all the muscle gain. He's lost all that muscle. He's become a lot more flexible, and he did a great interview at the PGA Championship talking about how he's in such a much better place with mentally and physically. At the PGA Championship, he was fantastic. He finished 4th. The week before that, he was top 10 at a Live tournament. The week after the PGA Championship, he was top 10 at a Live tournament. And yesterday, he went out, shot -3, and is tied for 7th. I loved his numbers in approaches and driving and putting. His putting and approaches really caught my attention because that's been a source of problem for him. He's going up against Justin Thomas, he's basically name value right now. This guy's been terrible this year. He missed the cut at the Masters. He finished 65th at the PGA Championship. He missed the cut at the Memorial, another stacked field. And he finished +3 yesterday. That's 6 shots behind Bryson DeChambeau, and these guys were playing at the same time of day. It's just not happening for Justin Thomas. His numbers off the tee are bad. His putting is terrible. His approach is bad. They've changed the pin placements today to make them more difficult. Who's the better golfer overall in general? I don't know. It's a toss-up. But right now, it's Bryson DeChambeau, and it's not even close. You can play this on DraftKings. Bryson DeChambeau, round 2, over Justin Thomas at -125. That is our best bet for the week. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much. Matt Josephs from sportsmemo.com, Andrew McGinnis from WagerTalk.com. Again, guys, if you guys want to leave a comment below right after we're done recording of NFL players that you want us to break down, any position, tight end, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, doesn't matter. Just leave it in the comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks very much, guys. Let's have a profitable weekend, and we will see everyone next week on Prop It Up.